Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Snap Decisions. I am your host with the most, your Snap DJ, and I've got a good friend of mine who I've known for a while now. And you guys, listen, you will need no introduction to him because all you need to know is this is Elevate the Sky, who has done the coolest Marvel Snap podcast theme that is out there. I know all of you have asked about it, have liked listening to it. People, I've saw videos of people singing along to it. It is Scott. Scott, man, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. How you doing, man?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Joe. This is exciting, and thank you so much for the kind words.
Absolutely, absolutely. Every time, man, it's so funny. I think I've sent you a couple of them. I know one of the people who plays. His name's Gunny T on Twitter. He's actually in the Air Force. He taped himself singing your song,
Oh,
and
I
he
remember
sent
that. Yeah.
Remember, I sent the video
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah. That was awesome.
So it just fits like so well with Marvel Snap and with the stuff that I do. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. So those of you who aren't familiar, Scott was we've known him since I used to have a podcast that was an 80s podcast. And that's kind of where we met. And he came on that show and we were talking a lot about his music and things like that. Because what he does is very, it's synthwave genre, but it's very throwback. A lot of it is very 80s. And that's what kind of, we brought him on the show for that. But as soon as I remembered the superhero song, I'm like, damn. And then I reached out, of course, to Scott, and he was kind enough to let me use it, which is phenomenal. At some point, I'm going to incorporate part of the video into my intro as well, which is absolutely tremendous. So, yeah, man. Scott, first of all, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, and obviously where they can get your music, and let everybody know where they can locate you. I know you're on Twitter, but other than that, let them know where they can find you, where your channel is, and how they can listen to your music.
Cool. Awesome. So, yeah, you can check me out over on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called Elevate the Sky, just the band name. And there you'll see all kinds of new music videos and other stuff, just kind of exploring LA, all kinds of different YouTube content there, gear reviews, that kind of stuff. And then also Bandcamp, also same thing, Elevate the Sky. And there you can purchase the music, all the albums, the new singles and releases, stuff like that. And
Awesome.
yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I do have an Instagram, Elevate the Sky, same thing. That's about it.
Scott has given me tours of California, which is tremendous. I love them. I've told him several times. He does videos on his channel where he just walks around places like Beverly Hills, which I've never seen. I've never been to California, and he's walking through there I think you were doing that right around the holidays, right? Like around
Yeah.
Christmas time and stuff too.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my God! Imagine there I am sitting in the snow and the cold, and there's Scott walking down the streets of Beverly Hills, and there's people playing music right out in the open, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like paradise. I mean, look at where he is, and I'm stuck in this cold. But yeah, his channel's a lot of fun, and if you've never
Thanks.
been to places like that, and I've never been well, I've been out west, but I've never been to California for more than just a pit stop in an airport. So it's so much fun, like seeing you do that stuff. The one where
Nice.
you were over the ocean. Oh my God, that was
Oh, yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Was so cool. It's like a little inlet that you could literally walk out like right over the ocean. That's incredible.
Yeah, man.
Incredible.
Yeah, hopefully we can get you out here, man. It'd be super awesome, you
I
know?
would love to take a trip out there at some point
Yeah.
someday. It looks beautiful. The one he did too, where he was in the observatory. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. You could see the whole city from where you were. It was high up and stuff like that. But oh man, yeah, it's so good. Yeah, check out his videos for sure. And yeah, check out the music. It's amazing. If you are a fan of the '80s, if you like that kind of music, anything and look, if you're a fan of my show and you listen to that song all the time, which you definitely do because it's on every episode, this is the man that it came from. So go check it out. But I want to get into, this superhero was on your first album, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the
All
album
right.
Ascend,
Okay.
2020.
Okay. And that was right. So what, I mean, I know musicians like yourself get inspirations from many, many places. Superhero, I love the lyrics in that all just fit together so well. The part about Iron Man and you know, where's the hammer and where's the shield. I loved it all. And then so what inspired you to do that? I mean, obviously you and I we talk about we have a lot of things in common. So I'm sure like me, you probably grew up a fan of all of this stuff, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much that stems off the inspiration. Like for example, you know, just growing up with
Yeah.
the Spider-Man movies, and that was a big start. But really, what kicked it off, the actual song "Superhero," is it was in 2013, which was such a tremendous year for Marvel movies, even DC. Like I really enjoyed Man of Steel,
Hmm.
but it was really Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Thor: The
Yeah.
Dark World. What else? Oh, Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
So it was really those movies that just, I mean, you know, I actually get more inspired by movies than actual music when it comes to writing music. And I just remember seeing a lot of those movies at the theater and just thinking, wow, I mean, you know, you just walk out of the theater so inspired, you know, with all the, you know, the great thing about Marvel movies is you get all the fun action, but you also get a great story, you get comedy, you get drama, you get romance, and it's just so much emotion when you walk out of that theater. So I just remember coming home and just sitting there writing some ideas like a chord progression. And after seeing a lot of those movies that year, it just came out of that, just like, wow, you know, um, I want to write something that relates to superheroes because, you know, me and you, like I said, we grew up with superheroes. And, you know, I grew up with, I guess my first real kind of taste of the whole superhero world was in the 80s with Secret Wars. You remember Secret
Oh, the
Wars? And it had the,
cartoon. Hmm.
yeah, and then it had the
Yeah.
Beyonder and the comics,
Yeah.
and that, you know, just that whole thing just kind of really kicked off my love for superhero stuff. And then Batman came out, of course, in the late 80s.
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, and so it was just kind of wild that it took this long for a lot of superhero movies to kind of really get footing, you know, because it wasn't until the 2000s, really. It was like Spider Man, and then after that, it's been nonstop, right? It's all
Yeah.
these blockbuster superhero movies. But before then, it just kind of like here and there, you know. And I owe a lot of credit, you know. One of my favorites would be, of course, Batman with Michael Keaton. I think kind of really opened that door because for a minute there, it was like superhero movies were like the worst B kind of movies, although I still love them. But you know, your everyday moviegoers are just like, that's so cheesy. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
dude, I
yeah.
love the 70s Spider Man and Captain America and Wonder Woman, you know? But, you know, they just didn't do that well. But finally, you know, like I said, after Batman and then Spider Man just kind of kicking that off, it's just great that we have all these amazing movies. But yeah, anyway, that's really all that built up, plus like I was saying, that year 2013 when all those superhero movies come out, that inspired that song.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great. Well, you're gonna really enjoy it. Like if you came in, Secret Wars was, and I don't know a lot of people know this, but Secret Wars was really done as a promotion. They did
Yeah.
that. They
Yep.
did it to sell toys. They
Yeah, I
literally
remember
came
that.
out with the comics to sell the
It
figures,
worked.
right?
It worked for
A-
me.
And now they're coming back around to that. So this next
Yeah.
round of Marvel films with the whole Universal Loki stuff that and all the worlds and stuff, they are going to do a Secret Wars film, which is going to be
Yes. I
mind
cannot
blowing.
wait.
So
Cannot
for
wait.
you, that's going to be incredible.
It is, dude.
But no,
Totally.
you're right. Like you know, my first one, and obviously, you know, I'm growing up. I'm watching the black and white Superman with my dad,
Oh, so
and we're
good.
watching the Lone Ranger back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And then of course Christopher Reeve's Superman came, and
Oh,
that's one I'll never forget.
yes.
I'll never
Yes.
forget being in the theater for that. The tagline for it was "You'll believe a man can fly," and like for back in that time, I mean, it was 1978. You know, we didn't have the technology that they have today to do all this stuff with. So they're working with like wires and things like that, and it still was incredible. And that's you know, the video for this song, a lot of that is that flight that he takes with Lois, and
Oh yeah.
it's just a tremendous. I love going back and watching that. Now they remastered it, and it looks way better than it ever looked probably. But yeah, like you're right. I could see where, and you do, like I've asked people on this show, have you seen, obviously, with the new stuff of course, the Avengers, that Avengers Endgame, and of course Infinity War and Endgame,
Yeah.
and how dark Infinity War was at the
Oh,
end. And
so
then
dark.
the end of Endgame, my gosh, I go back to watch on YouTube like reactions from that.
Yeah.
And the audiences are like freaking out, when he hears
Yeah.
the Falcon, "Hey Cap, on your left," and everybody goes nuts.
Yeah.
It was
That
one of
was
the coolest
such a
things I've
part
ever
epic part,
seen. Yeah, like
right?
were you in a theater like that? Did they go
Yes.
berserk when it?
Oh
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, everybody was so like, cheering and shouting, and that's the other reason why I love those kinds of movies, is because they're so relatable to real life. Yeah, of course, it's a fantasy world with
sure.
superheroes, but everything that has to do with that is about fighting for the good of
Yep.
mankind, right? It's
Yep.
it's about being the bigger person. It's about like not being selfish, right? Cuz superheroes, that's the ultimate thing they do, is they save our lives.
Right.
They step out there and they try to make the world a better place. And so really that's kind of like a homage to reality, and so it's so emotional, like you said. Like just watching Endgame was just wow, just so much emotion and happiness all at once, So it was
Yeah.
really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time to be seeing all of this stuff. They're really just, I think, honestly, with the technology and stuff we're getting in this stuff now, they're just hitting the iceberg
Oh, yeah.
with this stuff. They can go on, and it blows my mind. Like when I look at like some of the thing I like about this game is some of the cards in the game are old comic book covers. So they're covers from like the 1970s that they're using as cards, and I'm like, oh my god, I owned this book back
Yeah.
in the day. I read all this stuff, and it really ties in, and it's yeah, I love the history of all this, and the fact that when I look, I just realized it. In fact, today I was recording my audio pod a little earlier for the week, and I was looking at one of the cards, and the card was a Galactus card, right? So that big purple dude from the
Oh,
Fantastic Four.
yeah.
Well, he's finally going to
Yeah.
be in a film, not the dumb
Yeah.
cloud that they put in the Fox one, but
Yes. Yes.
he's going to be in a film, the upcoming Fantastic Four movie, which is supposed to be out next year sometime.
Oh
And
man.
the whole plot of the film, I guess they talked about it. This going to be there. It's mostly going to take place in space. And the thing is like they're in search of Galactus. Well, I happen to open up a thing. One of the cards in the game, a Galactus card, is that comic book cover from Fantastic Four 210. I opened it up, and there's the thing that says "In Search of Galactus." I'm like, oh my god, they're taking stuff from this book.
I
The book's
love
from
that.
like 1977, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Wow.
I'm
That
like, I
is.
didn't even realize it, but yeah, it's so cool. And like you said, heroes have always been a big thing, right? We're
Yes.
always looking, and especially, times can be tough for everyone in this world. I mean, you see it in your daily life every single day. It's just hard. It's a struggle. But to be able to go and sit in the theater for a couple hours and get away from all that, and then come
Yes.
away, like you said, you're feeling not only like really good, you're feeling good, but you can even come away feeling a little bit inspired, thinking like,
Yes.
yeah, I don't have superpowers, but how can I just be maybe a little better, a little more
Yep.
positive, do some things a little
Exactly.
bit, that make some people happy. And as I'm sure yourself as a musician, that's part of what you do, right? Like not only is it
Yes.
fun for you and it makes you happy, but you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to do this because I know this is going to relate to people.
Oh yeah, by far, man. I mean, the wild thing about being human is, obviously we see the outside shell, and we don't think about this often, but we're energy. That's what we are. And when you do something good for somebody else, it comes back to you as well. So it's like this circle of positive energy. And if you think about that, it's kind of like when you think about superheroes, it's kind of the same thing. It's like some superheroes, they get weak, but it's that energy that they gain back whenever they think about things like whether they're fighting for Lois or whether they're fighting for the people on the street,
Yep.
the innocent people. Um, when it's things like that, like you said, that make, not just the movies, but the comics so great,
Yep.
is it's more than just a story. It's more than just about superheroes. It really is this kind of motivation of life, of like, getting you to get up and make things better today. That's what it's about. And even whenever you go back and read about or watch documentaries on a lot of the creators of all these superheroes, I mean, it was the same kind of thing coming from them, just trying to make a better place, coming out of World War I and World War II. And
Yeah,
so it just made a lot of sense in the Great Depression. And so they were just trying to do things to make people's lives better. And here we are, like probably hundreds of years later, and close to it, and it's still strong, right? And
that's
that's what's great
crazy.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was just thinking of that yesterday when I was looking up a book, and I'm like, the character rather, and this character was originated in the 1950s. That's insane for me to think that
Yeah. Yeah.
we're in 2024,
Yeah.
and right now they're doing films about characters that were made 60 years ago,
Yes.
which is
Oh yeah.
crazy to me.
It is
You
pretty
know,
crazy.
oh man, yeah, all those guys. Stan Lee obviously is the one who comes to people's minds when you think of Marvel, but there were so many people,
So many.
the artists and the writers and all of that stuff that went into all of those books. And it's tremendous. Like the amount of that's why people when somebody comes and tells me, or you hear a movie critic saying, these superhero movies, we there's superhero fatigue, they're gonna die. Listen, they've got material back from 60 some odd years. Yeah, they're not gonna die. They have a
Yeah.
lot of stuff they can do.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. I mean,
so
it's no different than, if you're going to say that, you might as well say, well, there's not going to be any more sci-fi or space
yep,
movies or romantic comedies or,
yep.
this stuff is going to be around. It just, there's always going to be somebody that's going to get creative, or like you said, there's just a lot of stories to be told, and people are going to relate to those stories.
No doubt. No doubt. It was always human, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so many people relate to Spider-Man, right? Because it was
Oh, man.
with great power comes great responsibility. It
Yep.
was the speech from Uncle Ben. And
Oh, yes.
that's his motivation. He goes back to that. The movies changed it a little bit. It was Aunt May who said it to him in the most recent one. But
Yeah.
whatever. That's his motivation. He is motivated by that phrase that he heard when his Uncle Ben passed away, and that's always been his motivation
Yeah.
of anything that he does. So yeah, it's really amazing how that's all come throughout the years. So I want to ask you a little bit. I'm sure that the people are interested in. So what's your background? Of course, obviously in music. Like when did you get started doing the music and playing music and all that stuff? I know always it fascinates me with musicians. Like when did you pick it up? When did you maybe first start playing a guitar or something something along those lines?
Yeah. So it's kind of a long story. I'll try to make it as short as
Yeah,
possible.
no
But
problem.
um, I mean, I think I owe credit to my family. They were always a musical family, not necessarily
Okay.
like instrument wise, but just listening to music around the house. So as far back as I can remember being alive, being born, music was the first thing I remember. Just being, something I could relate to, and something I've always done was sing to stuff or get in front of the stereo. Remember they had those recording mics, to those
Yes.
stereos. Like you could
Yep.
get in front of those and sing and
You could
record
sing
it.
over the speaker while the
You
music was playing.
could,
Yeah, those are
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, those are so cool. And I remember just singing to like Genesis and Aerosmith and Styx and Def Leppard and stuff.
Yep.
And so that was really the start of my adventure. Was listening to that kind of music that my parents and my brothers and sisters listened to. And then the first real punch to me was like my sister was singing this song, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that song? I like that song." And it ended up being "Heaven's on Fire" by Kiss.
Oh man.
And I said, "Who is that?" And she was like, "Oh, it's this band named Kiss. They used to wear makeup." And I was like, "Oh, okay," because I remember I watched Phantom of the Park when I was younger, and
Yep.
Gene Simmons scared me, and
Yeah, I'm
but
sure.
I kept watching because I loved Peter Criss, the Cat
Yep.
Man. And so it kind of started from there as far as like listening to music heavily and buying my own music. But then it was in the early 90s. I finally got a chance to go see Kiss live. My friend and my sister took me to see the Revenge Tour in 1992. And that was it. I just knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I got a guitar, And one of the guys that took me to the concert, he was already a phenomenal guitar player. So he had showed me a couple things on guitar, and that's really where it all started. Was just going to that concert, just really sparked that in me. And from there, I'd always had a love for like Vangelis, like the Blade Runner
Hmm.
soundtrack and
Yeah.
Tangerine Dream stuff. And
Yep.
so there was also that other side of me that loved synthesizers. And so when I discovered synthwave in around, I guess, 2011, um, thanks to Tron Legacy, because I was actually searching for Tron Legacy on
Oh
YouTube,
man,
and
Daft
it was
Punk.
opened up this rabbit hole of all these electronic artists, and it just so happened that some of those artists were like Laserhawk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really where it all kicked off. And so guitar is my first instrument, but the keyboard has always been around because my brother played keyboard, and he
Okay.
had a Roland Alpha, Juno Alpha, and he gave that to me. I guess he gave that to me in the early '90s. So even though I couldn't play it, I would just mess around with it throughout the '90s while I was learning guitar. So it kind of, in a way, kind of learned on my own just by messing around on it. So
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah,
thanks.
that's awesome. Yeah, it comes from similar places, and I know we've talked about in the past that I've just chatted with you about the radio. Used to listen to the radio all
Yeah.
the time, and back in the day, and the younger folks that are listening are gonna be like, "What are they talking about?" We we used to have these big stereos that had cassette decks, right?
Oh yeah.
And these cassettes you'd put in there, and I'd be listening to the top 40 countdown because we didn't have internet back then, guys. Believe it or not, it wasn't
Yeah.
around. So we couldn't figure out what titles of songs were unless we literally would record it on a radio. And
Yeah.
hopefully the DJ would come on and say the name, which many
Yeah.
times they actually
No, you
didn't.
wouldn't. Yeah.
So I went crazy, crazy trying to figure out certain songs. I'll never forget. And I know you know the song. Modern Day Delilah that came out in like the
Oh
early
yeah.
80s.
Yep.
I could never. I heard it on the countdown so many times, and there I am sitting with my cassette gun. I gotta find out what this is called because you literally have to call the record stores and say, "Hey, do you have this song by blah blah blah?" And if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
know it, there was no way for you to find out who it was. Well,
Yeah.
thankfully MTV came along, and that kind of helped that because you saw the artist and everything at the very end of the videos. But yeah, it's insane, like the stuff that we had to do. But yeah, that's essentially, we come from similar places there because my parents always had they had albums, always played the records and stuff like that. My mom listened to music all the time. My father had the Kiss blasting in his 8-track player in his van.
Nice.
It's a very very similar story. But yeah, it's amazing. I love to hear like when musicians come and get that inspiration to actually go and learn how to play guitar. So were you always doing, like, right now, obviously, if people don't know, right, so the synthwave genre came around, like, when would you say that kind of started to pick up steam? I know some people were saying came after that movie Drive kind of
Yeah.
sparked
Yeah.
it because of the soundtrack. So that came out what few
2011,
okay, yeah,
and and it still didn't pick up steam quite yet. I mean, there was definitely a scene happening, but I would say by the time that it finally started to kind of grow was probably around the time Turbo Kid and Stranger Things come out. So I guess
yeah, okay, that makes sense.
2016
Yep.
was really the year that I remember that it just kind of exploded on the underground scene, because the Midnight had released their biggest album to date, I think, which was Endless Summer. And Days of Thunder did pretty good, but there still wasn't quite the Midnight craze yet. I think
Yes.
that Time Cop and had kind of started catching on first, and then you had, well, obviously Kavinsky first because of the movie Drive, Kavinsky
Yep.
and Electric Youth. Um, but then it just kind of snowballed when vocals entered into the scene.
Yep.
So yeah, you had the Midnight, you had Time Cop would have a special guest vocalist here and there, and then you had FM 84. So that, I would say 2016 was the first year I think it really just kind of went from where it had been around 2011 up to that point, kind of lukewarm, to just boom. Now
Yep.
I'm seeing people that I would never expect to know synthwave who knows synthwave, you know.
Yeah.
So that I thought that was really cool to just watch that kind of grow.
Yeah, and I mean, you're out in the perfect spot for that kind of stuff. Music tends to come a lot from California.
Yeah.
Stuff develops a lot there over the years. You can go back and watch documentaries. I watched a documentary about like you were saying, the Def Leppard's, like the hair metal, really, really rooted there. A lot
Yeah.
of that was rooted in California. People talking, and it was it was a fun documentary to watch. They were talking about how bands were putting posters up on telephone poles.
Yeah.
You'd have like the ones that telephone pole that would be up the highest on the phone pole that they couldn't rip down would be the ones that would get noticed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so all those hair metal, Poison, Def Leppard, all those hair metal bands that were from that scene, Warrant and stuff like that came out of California area, were all performing in the clubs and stuff like that there. But I didn't get into it until I actually Ed, my friend Ed, that you've met, of course, on the 80s show. He was the one who introduced me to Tech Noir, uh,
Oh, yes.
the song by
Awesome.
Gunship. I
Gunship,
had never heard it
yes.
before. And then he shells me that, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm hooked. What kind of music is this? And then that's when I found out, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's an entire genre of music that is all like old stuff I remember from the 80s. This is phenomenal. And then, like you were saying, some vocals, some not. But it's, and the best way I could describe it is it just reminds me of driving in my 72 Monte Carlo down a street in town, cruising at night with the window down in the summer, and just the kind of music that we would listen to. And it's so amazing for me because it just floods you with memories.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm sure you write the songs, and I'm sure a lot of that is probably coming from maybe even your memories too that you're putting into these
Oh,
songs. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah, by far. Like, I mean, that song Radio, that's completely what that's about is, I used to, just like you were saying earlier, you would just get in front of the radio waiting for that song, and,
Yep.
your finger on that
On the
record button
record
just in
button.
case 'cause you had to hit it fast, right? And sometimes they always talked at the beginning of the song, so that was annoying, but you didn't care. You'd still record that part. And then so that was a big part of that song is talking about those memories and me going to the arcade with my best friend
Oh
and
man.
going to see really cool movies and stuff and listening to the radio on your bed at night till you fall
Yep.
asleep. And so, yeah, it's just great. And, I think it was such a great time period. I mean, obviously every decade has its thing, right?
Sure.
But the one thing that I, uh, give credit to the 80s is the fact that if you think about it, like whether it was music, movies, comic books, or even wrestling, they all kind of like they're similar in the way that they kind of give you this escape, right? Because
Yes.
when you look at wrestlers, how flamboyant they looked at
Oh
that
yeah.
time period, like Macho Man
Yep.
and Hulk Hogan and
Superheroes. They
superhero,
essentially were.
exactly. And
Yep.
so it would just fit right into this whole superhero theme, right? Same thing with
Yep.
the bands, right? When you looked at like Rat and Kiss in the 80s, and they look like larger than life superheroes,
Yep.
Of course, some people would disagree and say they look like something else, but they weren't like everyday people, in other words. So it was something you looked at and got inspired by, like, whoa, that's cool,
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
what was so cool about the 80s is that you had all these themes that would kind of like work together. If you
Yep.
liked wrestling, it was most likely you liked heavy metal. If you liked heavy metal, most likely you probably, read comic books or
Yep.
played D&D or so they
Yep.
all kind of had this thread, and that's what was so cool about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you're no, you're right. Like the personalities, and again, it ties back, like you were saying, everything ties back into like the whole the superhero type culture where it just went a little bit of a different direction, but it stayed with the fact that you're yeah, as a kid, you're doing you're doing fantasy stuff, right?
Oh
We
yeah.
again, going back, and I know it's hard for some younger people that may be listening to believe this, but like we hardly had any, like, even toys and stuff like that
Yeah.
were they weren't anything what they are like today.
Yeah,
Like
not even close.
I often say, I'm like, oh my God, when Star Wars came out, if I would have had my hands on one of the lightsabers like they have today, I'd have been in my glory. I would never would have let it
Yeah.
go. And it's like here we're using flashlights, and
Yeah.
we're using like anything we could possibly use because they didn't make stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like it's insane.
And those
But
cheap plastic ones that would break after so
yeah, the
long, you
plastic
know?
or the aluminum one with the red top that everyone
Yeah.
had in the
Yeah.
80s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And obviously you mentioned Stranger Things. That I know brought a lot of it back too, because
Yeah.
people when they watch that, all they're getting is stuff like that we did when we were kids. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
we sat around playing Dungeons and Dragons. I
Yeah.
love the last season where they were outcasts because
Yeah.
don't go with the D&D people because that's no good.
Right.
That's satanic. You don't want
Yeah.
to play that. I remember my mother saying that to me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be playing this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it was,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, but yeah, it's phenomenal that. And look, you've seen enough to know music comes back around,
Oh
right?
yeah. It definitely
You
does.
things that have gone will end up being popular again. It's just how that happens.
Yeah.
So even you even hear little remnants of like disco in certain types of music now that
Oh yeah.
everybody thought that was dead and gone, but
Yeah.
things come back. And it's for us older folks, it's nostalgia. But what's great about it is the people who listen to it now, and what you're doing, and the other artists that are synthwave artists and stuff, you're bringing back a part of your life, but yet now you're introducing it to a whole new group of people that are young. And listen, I've known a lot of fans now that are, people that are coming up to me, just in work, that I may open up a conversation with somebody that's a little bit younger that I work with, and I'm saying, oh, have you ever, you listen to music, blah blah blah, and then I tell them about some of these bands. They're like, oh yeah, I listen to them, they're awesome, blah blah blah, and I'm like, that's amazing.
Right?
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And
Uh,
that's one of the things about the internet. Of course, the internet has its cons, but definitely the pros about the internet, besides being able to do what we're doing now, is the fact that it brought a whole new, well, more than just one generation, the music that we were able to grow up on, the music before us. And so I think it's opened up the door for the young kids. And, what really shocks me, like you said, it blew my mind when I was talking to a couple of my nephews and they were like, oh, I love the Final Countdown by Europe or
oh my,
Journey,
it's
Don't
like,
Stop Believing. And
yep,
it's just like, it blows your mind. You're like, you know that?
yep,
So it's
yep.
really cool.
100%. I've gotten to be friends with him. There's another person who does a show like this. He started before I did, but we've become friends. The reason it hooked me was because he calls himself the Kid Snap, and his thing is all 80s themed. Like he literally wears
Nice.
he has like a mullet wig. He wears sunglasses on every show, right?
Yes.
And his brother comes on with him and does it. And his brother has the big old shades, like the old 1970s, and they have synthwave music that plays them in. They use like a
Awesome.
synthwave song that plays them in, and I'm like, this is the couple times I've been on their show. I'm like, well, listen, if you guys are cosplaying on here for 80s, I'm joining you in that.
There
So
you
the first
go.
time I was on, I had my Terminator shades on.
Yes.
This past time I went on, I dressed up. I had a wig from a costume that I wear for Halloween, so long brown hair, and I got an eye patch, and I went on their show as Snake Plissken, and I'm like,
Oh, yes.
but that it's phenomenal, and it's like even what they do, and I've told him, I said I love the show because you're appealing to me because I love what that stuff. I love what you're incorporating into your show, but you're also now appealing to people playing this game that are, might be a lot younger. And now they're going to look at that and be like, wow, that's really cool. Where does that music come from? And similarly to how people are asking me, that your theme is amazing. Where does that come from? And now all of a sudden it's being passed on to younger generations, which that's awesome.
It is, man. I love it. And that just goes to show you uh, the power of not just music, but anything good, right? Like anything that has something behind it that's inspiring. And that's one of the things about the 80s as well, is there was a lot of uplifting music coming out at that time.
Right.
When you go back and listen to, I guess probably more like the 70s or the 90s is kind of like your more introspective and a little bit more melancholic type of music. But the
Right.
80s, man, it was all party and
Oh, it was.
happy and you can do anything you want. It was that kind of music. It was
Yeah.
like get up and go. And so it's really great to see, whatever generation discover that, because once they do, you can see it in their eyes. They realize why we love it so much, because there's
Yep.
just something different about it.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, it's always going to be, it'll be with me until, I'm not on this planet anymore. And I love it. And I always will. And I
Yeah.
think it's tremendous. So tell me about how, so obviously, now you have two albums out right now. And you're coming out with a third, right? You just had a new song that you just put on YouTube, I know. So is that the progression now into your third record, or did you just kind of do that as a single one off type thing?
Just as a single,
Okay.
my new plan is to release a lot of singles for a little while.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, just kind of trying, experimenting with the new direction. The new direction is going to have all kinds of, mixed genres in there.
Nice.
Elevate the Sky stuff is definitely still going to be there as well. I'm still going to write a lot of synthwave stuff. I just thought I would take a break from the album thing. It takes a lot of time,
Oh,
and
I'm sure.
uh, plus the way things are now in the music industry with Spotify and a lot of streaming services,
Yeah.
it makes more sense to release singles as much as you can if possible, and then release albums like maybe every couple years. Um, if you're a big artist, it makes sense to release albums.
Oh, no
Because you're
doubt. Yeah.
your fans are always waiting for a collection of songs, but getting discovered, you know, you're trying to get as many people as possible to find your stuff online, because the algorithm, like YouTube, for example,
Oh, YouTube is
Facebook,
terrible.
Instagram, like the
Yeah.
algorithm is set up, and it makes sense. I mean, it doesn't seem fair, but in the end, it makes sense why they set up an algorithm, because the algorithm is basically there to go, what do people like, right?
Right.
And the more that people show a like towards something, whether that would be like a post about superhero movies or video games, or a post about some particular band, that algorithm is going to start showing that to more people.
Yep.
And that's just how it works. So that's why, and a lot of people don't realize this, but like on YouTube, for example, if you like a video, you're telling the algorithm to add that to your list of, like, maybe show that to more people. People don't realize how important that like is. That like isn't just there for like, oh, that makes me feel good. No, it's
Yeah.
it's there to change that algorithm to push people towards your stuff. And because of that, it's kind of hard. But at the same time, the advantage of it is now we have something, a system that can do that better than a human, right? Like you only have select few people working at, whatever it might be, some record label like A&R people. Like they couldn't do it as fast as a computer. So
Yep.
in that sense, it's an advantage. But because of that, that's why I've decided just to release a lot of singles right now, just to kind of get the algorithm seeing me more often, instead of, as opposed to like, oh, well, here comes this guy like a year later out of nowhere just trying to promote stuff, versus like just consistently like always releasing.
It makes sense because, and
Yeah.
even for me and the stuff that I do,
Yeah.
it's all about content. You have to
Yes. Oh,
push out the
yes.
content,
Have
and if
to.
you don't, you're going to get lost. Your
Yep.
stuff will get lost in the algorithm, just like you said. Yeah, yeah, it's difficult. Like me. For me, it's a small show. I don't do this. I do maybe 1-2 videos a week if I'm lucky. But like you said, again, it's when you're in that position. you're going to get lost, and that's
Yes.
in that way it kind of sucks. But I have, to your
Yeah.
point, I've been seeing, like, even like on, I have Apple Music, even on there I've even seen like a lot of bands that I've listened to over the years now are doing similar things to what you're doing here. They're just
Yeah.
putting out singles, so
Yeah.
now you'll see a song appear here and there, which is, which I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. I think Def Leppard, in fact, just put out a song that I just saw pop up out of nowhere. Just came up on my music like last week, and I'm like, oh, they released a song. I wonder if they're coming out with an album. It's called
Yeah.
Just Like 73 is the name of the
Oh,
song they put out.
I've got to check it out.
Yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
good. It's actually a little heavy. It's a little heavier than
Oh,
they've been.
nice.
But yeah, so it would seem like a lot of people are going in that same direction. And just to let the audience know, because to do an album, right, on average, how long would you say it would be to like compose an entire album for yourself?
It varies, but for me personally, it takes me a while. I would say, well, the first album took 7 years, but that's because, it was a lot of going back and forth on what kind of genre am I doing? What's my
Yeah.
sound? So that's why the first one took a long time. And plus, I was already coming out of doing other styles of music. Like I was in rock bands, hard rock bands, and stuff
Yep.
like that. The second album, Dreaming in Color, that one took 2 years.
Okay.
Um, and that one probably could have taken maybe just a year, but I was already promoting the first album at the same time I was writing for the second album. So the first year of that, I was just kind of more still pushing Ascend. So yeah, probably about a year and a half, more likely. Um,
I don't think people realize that, and I know I never did. I have a friend who is he owns a recording studio locally, and he records a lot of bands. He's done some work with Breaking Benjamin and other bands that were around the area. So I got to sit in. He called me up and he said, "Hey, come up to the studio sometime," because he knows I love music. So I got to sit in and watch. And you cannot believe the work that goes into that. Like,
yeah,
oh my God,
a
I
lot
never
of work.
realized all you do when you go out and you're buying like a CD, right? Or if you're downloading songs or something on the internet, and you're like, it's just a collection of maybe 10 3-minute songs, right? Or
Yeah.
in and around there, so okay, it's 30 minutes. Oh, this can't be. Oh my God, the work that it goes into to put every instrument on top of the other, and to record the bass part, then record the guitar, and then do the drums, and then you get the vocals, and they mix them all together.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, and you do that stuff yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah, that's why it takes so long,
I would
Yeah, if you
have
have a team, it's
no.
easier.
He has an Apple computer that he uses for it. I think he has Pro Tools. I want to say he uses Pro Tools or something like
Nice.
that. Is it called? But like, it's like, good Lord. And I'm watching him with this. You could see, and it almost looks like I remember vaguely going to music classes back in the day. So you see the little bar like you
Yeah.
used to see on the music sheets, and then you see him messing around with all of these lines, and I'm like, what's that color? Well, that's the
Yeah.
bass. What's that color? That's the drums. I'm like, dude. I'm like, how in God's name do you do this? It's like insane. But then, then you have the musician or the band having to come back time after time after time. You're not just going in there and doing this in one day. You're going in there and you're doing this track, and then you're going in and doing a little bit of this one, and then they're doing
Yeah.
the instruments in the back. Holy cow. It's a
Yeah.
wonder. And I used to get mad. You talked about Kiss. I used to get mad sometimes when I was a young kid, thinking like, what the heck takes them so long to release
Yeah.
another album? I want another album already.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, people don't
Yeah.
even realize what goes into that. It's
That's true.
crazy.
Yeah, even sometimes a band will scrap everything they've done. Like maybe sometimes there's song like maybe 8 to 10 songs, and a band will go, you know what? Let's start all over, and they'll scrap all that. Like Def Leppard did that for Hysteria, right? They were
Yep.
trying to get Mutt Lange back on board, but
Yep.
he was very busy at the time, so they had Jim Steinman, and it just wasn't working. So they had already recorded. I forget how many songs they recorded with them. They ended up scrapping. I mean, they still used the songs. They just didn't use the ones they recorded. So they ended up starting the whole project over once they got Mutt Lange on board, and which was actually probably a good thing, because according to Joe Elliott, at least on this video I saw, he was just like, talking about the guitars being out of tune, and Jim Steinman didn't care, and he's just like, yeah,
Mm,
but to some kid in Idaho it's going to be out of tune, so they were used to working with somebody like Mutt Lange that was about perfection, about getting it right,
yep.
getting the vocals right, getting all these production techniques down, because they weren't trying to just release an album. They were trying to release something groundbreaking, and they did it.
Yes.
And that just goes to show you, like, it took them, I think, 4 years to get that thing out. So, yeah, sometimes that's the reason why it takes an artist a long time, is because sometimes they listen back to it and go, I just don't like this. And they scrap it and start all over.
I remember when they wrote inside of Hysteria a big thing describing that,
Yeah.
and if I remember correctly. But you know what? It's funny because then they came out with that. Oh, I forget that it was a retro. Was it called Retroactive by them? That the woman sitting in front of the mirror on the album
Yeah. It looked
cover.
like a skull. Yeah.
That was a lot of those lost songs from Hysteria that
Yeah.
never made the album. And I'll tell you what, there's some bangers on that.
Oh, man. I want to be
Um,
your hero. I love that.
Yes.
Ring of
Yeah, there's some
Fire.
yep. There's some
Oh,
there's some really good songs on that album. But yeah, it just goes to show you, like, if you have favorite artists and stuff that you listen to, don't get upset if they don't have music out every couple of years,
I know
because
it's so easy to do though,
it's
because
a
you're
it's
like,
a well,
I'm
you're
like that with
anxious.
Electric Youth. I'm
Mhm.
like, come on, release something.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you're constantly. I always now. I go into Apple's new releases on the phone, and I'm always looking in the new releases like months and months ahead, because they'll get notifications when something new is coming out, and then I'm looking down through and I'm looking for stuff, and then all of a sudden I'll see a band pop up out of nowhere that I haven't heard in a while. I'm like, oh, this is cool. They're coming out with a new album. This is awesome. But yeah, just it's yeah, it's patience, people, because yeah, it's a process.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, man. So your newest video just came out. Talk
Yeah.
about the song a little bit. So I
Cool.
watched it. It's amazing. And
Thank you.
yeah. Tell me where, like, what inspired. It was a little different from what you've been doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. And yeah, let me know tell us what the inspiration was for the song.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I wanted to, like I was saying earlier about doing, kind of more rock and different music before the synthwave thing. I wanted to kind of go back and bring some of those songs back, and so I started a new project called Ocean and the Stars, and it's just going to be a variety of stuff. Some stuff is going to be heavy, some stuff is going to be soft, like that song. It's going to be very dreamy, and so it's
Mhm.
very inspired by a lot of stuff like Pink Floyd and
Okay.
even some of the indie stuff like M83 and anything that has come out in the past 20 years, or even the 90s, like Smashing Pumpkins
Yep.
or Lush, Slow Dive, and just a lot of more dreamy and dream pop and shoegaze and alternative rock, and
Yeah.
but still a lot of influence from the 80s, like Tears for Fears and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really where this song came from, is just kind of being inspired mostly out of me listening to a lot of Pink Floyd and that kind of stuff, the kind of slow, airy Alan Parsons Project.
Oh yeah.
And it was just kind of another avenue so I can express something a little more melancholic or a little more dreamy. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about that, to take it in all these different directions. Like I said, I mean, you're liable to see a song and go, what is going on? Because I want to be experimental with some of the songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be exciting. And the inspiration for the video, of course, is, I have a love for like the early 20th century, the late 1800s, the whole, silent film
I could
era
see
and that
that.
kind
As
of
soon as I
stuff.
saw it, I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
this is silent filmish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you could tell, like, when you were saying Pink Floyd, when you said Alan Parsons, yes. It's
Yeah.
like, I remember I loved Alan Parsons' Eye in the Sky, of
Oh,
course,
yes.
and
Love it.
Time, the song Time
Oh,
that they
man.
did.
Time is so
Uh,
good.
and then, of course, Pink Floyd had an amazing song, Time, too. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's great, man. It's
Thanks.
funny because like even David Gilmour now has a song out, brand new song out too. I saw
Yeah.
on Apple.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's these people who are, I mean, they're up in age. He's older than I am, pretty much older than I am actually, and he's still out there
Yeah.
recording songs, and it's but yeah, the genre, that genre is actually really cool. It's like you call it dreamy. It's a good way to describe it because
Yeah.
it's almost like you're, people when and I think a lot of Pink Floyd fans got a bad rap back in the day because people
Yeah.
just assumed that they were, oh my God, you're Pink Floyd, you're on drugs, you're
Yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
this, you're doing that. And it wasn't, people laugh and joke about it. I know when I first watched the movie The Wall back then,
Yeah.
of course we're sitting there like 15, 14 years old, and we're sitting there like in my cousin's house, and we're drinking beer, and we're like, so it's like, yeah, okay, I guess it kind of fits, but it's like when you listen to it today, you can, it's just, I think the best way I can maybe describe a lot of that is it's relaxing. I
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
that music
Yeah.
relaxing to
It
me.
is. Yeah.
Like sure they have the harder stuff sometimes every now and then, but like those songs we just mentioned, you can just sit and just chill. It kind of relaxes you a little bit. If you're coming home like from a bad day at work or something and you're in the car, which is when I do a lot of my listening to music anyway,
Yeah.
for that half an hour that I'm driving, you just kind of want something to wind you down.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's great for that. So that's awesome that you're experimenting.
Thanks.
So you're gonna have like some of that kind of stuff, and then you're gonna do some like other things. So like just a combination of stuff that you'll be doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
Nice.
have a couple in the works now. Like one song is actually kind of more um you'll hear a little bit of garbage influence in there. You'll hear a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit of oh, what's a good maybe even Hole, I don't know. Just a lot of different kind of
It's a little kind of 90s ish.
90s
Yeah, grunge.
90s-ish but at the same time there's song that is completely opposite of that, like something that's a little more like the Chromatics or M83,
Yep.
Electric Youth. So and then I also have this one song that I'm working on now. Hopefully I'll be able to release it the end of this month, called The Heartbeat, which is very inspired by that whole new wave 80s thing, like your
Awesome.
Simple Minds, Tears for Fears,
Oh
and
yeah.
Depeche Mode. So it's kind of in that vein.
They used to call that, if I remember right, a lot of that stuff, like Depeche Mode. I'm trying to think of some of the other bands. I would even say like the Clash, and then there was a few others. They would call them college rock bands back
Oh
in the
yeah,
day.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember?
Yeah.
Like even you
Yeah.
two, started off as
Yeah.
well. That's college rock.
That's
I never even
college
knew what the
rock.
term
Yeah.
was. I'm like, what? You have to be in college to listen to this? Like, what? I
I
don't get
know,
it.
right?
But yeah, that became like that. They oh my gosh, for as popular as U2 has gotten, they've started in very very small places
Yeah.
and weren't really listened to very much. They had their own little subculture of. I know you had what, The Cure was in that genre. REM was
Yeah.
in that. So they had a grouping of that came out. But yeah, that's really cool though. As a musician, it must be a little more fun to spread out, right? Instead
Oh
of
yeah.
taking that one
Yeah.
album being like, yeah, I got to kind of do all this.
Yeah.
When you're doing the synthwave records, a lot of it is probably similar with the keyboards and styles and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I would imagine a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So I could see where spreading your wings a little bit on a record and doing some different stuff must be more exciting a little bit
It
sometimes.
is. It's very exciting, and I think it would be a lot more exciting if you did kind of say, for example, stick with a very similar sound throughout your career. It's a little more exciting if you have, like, say that's like your job, right? Like what I'm
Right.
doing now, it's not necessarily. I mean, it is a job, but it doesn't pay like a job quite yet. So you have to find multiple avenues to get that pay,
Sure.
right? So, but yeah, if you're somebody like Kiss or Prince, you've got millions of followers.
Yes.
So, that's different because, you're beholden to, like, okay, they are expecting another, whatever album. But, and at the same time, you can also understand why they change over time. Because, I remember being kind of mad at Prince going from Purple Rain uh, to, like, the next few albums, like with Kiss and all that kind of those songs,
Yes.
that I just thought it was just too different from what he was already doing.
Yeah.
And I just didn't like it. I do now, but at the time I didn't like it. And the same thing I did with Kiss, after Revenge, they did Carnival of Souls, and I just couldn't get into it at the
It was
time.
grunge. It was
It was very
basically Kiss's
grunge.
version of grunge.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. But now I understand. Now I understand that when you're an artist, it's like painting a picture. You don't want to just paint the sunset. Oh, I'll move the sun over there now. But no,
Yep.
next time you might be abstract.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's very true. Some people, it always seems like bands that have lasted for a long, long time, right?
yeah,
Will always change themselves at some points. Like
yeah,
even from when Pink Floyd got rid of the whole thing happened with Roger Waters and he
yeah.
left the band, they became an entirely different band. When they
Oh
came out
yeah,
with Momentary Lapse of Reason, it was like
yeah.
wow, like
Right.
the sound was very different. Learning to Fly was
Yeah.
such an amazing song
Oh
and
yeah.
just completely different type of sound. But yeah, I would imagine like it's talking about the process about making an album and stuff like that, that it would be more exciting to be able to venture out and to
Yeah.
do like other things beyond what you're normally doing, because otherwise, like you were saying, with Prince and stuff like that, Prince was Purple Rain was such an iconic album,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of heavy guitar and stuff like that for the times. But then he probably is like, you know what, I kind of like soul a little bit
Yeah.
R&B.
Yeah.
I grew up with that. I kind of
Yeah.
want to go back to that and do some of that a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly.
it's great, and that's why I said, it's got to be, to have the talent to do what you do. It's got to be amazing, because
Oh,
to be able to
thanks.
just sit there and just play the piano or play the guitar and just start coming up with something that's in your head from whatever it is, a memory or an experience, or like we talked about earlier, seeing a film, and then just start, all of a sudden you come home and you grab the guitar and you just start playing a couple of notes and things like that. That's got to be like, to me, that's got to be an amazing feeling.
Oh
Like
yeah.
for when that happens.
Yeah. It definitely is. It's I mean, it can be frustrating too, because there's times that you want to write something, but that's usually the times nothing comes out, right? Like
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
try, or maybe you will write something, but the next day you listen to it and you're like, oh, there's no way I'm showing people that. You know? But yeah, you're right. It's a really great feeling. And this is why you hear a lot of people in like interviews say like like the door opened up, or maybe the heavens gave me this, or that's why you hear that, because it really is kind of this out of nowhere thing. You might like come out of the movie, or you might be walking down the street and something happens in front of you, and then you get home, and then you're feeling this emotion from whatever you saw, and then you sit down at the piano or the guitar, and then it just kind of unfolds on its own. It's really weird in a way. It's kind of you know
I would imagine. Yeah.
yeah, that's wild.
Scott and I did a reaction video for a song by Journey, which we
Oh
both love,
yes.
and just going through that with you and dissecting that song and trying to think of where he got the inspiration from for this is really
Yes.
amazing to do. Like you sit there and you think, man, he must have been going through it. Like there must have been a relationship here that somebody just, it happened and he lost the girl and this and that. And so, yeah, you can take inspiration from anything
Yeah.
at all in your
Oh
life.
yeah.
You can look back and look for, at certain events, like you were saying, that just happened to you out of the blue, or something along those lines. And I would bet you, looking back at, the writers and the artists of these comic books that we talked about are the same way. They
Oh
had
yeah.
probably so many inspirations that inspired them to do. Stan often talks about, I wanted to make a hero that was more down to earth with Peter Parker. I
Yeah.
wanted someone that people could relate to. You had your Superman, you had your, these huge figures, but the thing was, nobody could ever think they're going to be Superman.
Yeah.
But with Spider-Man, you can relate to this kid. He gets picked on in high school all the
Yep.
time. He gets beat up. He comes home. He gets bullied. He's just like
Yep.
a normal person. So yeah, it's really cool. Like it's, and again, you go back to your first statement about how so much of this relates together.
It
They're
does.
different things, but it just all adds to the stuff that makes us who we are. And whether it be games, music, this, that, and the other thing, movies and stuff like that, it's tremendous how it all just equates to the same stuff.
Oh yeah. Like at the end of the day, what's amazing is uh you're born into this world, you have these things set out in front of you, whether it's religion, politics, or this movie's popular, this music's popular, so you have things that are kind of like a blueprint of like how you can live your life. But deep down, every human being just has this thing in them that wants to be independent. They want to be able to create, they want to be able to find their own way in life and tell their own story. And it's like you, for example. I mean, you got this show, and then you had I've Lived the '80s, and you have the other show that you're working on. It's the same thing as a music artist. You're creating. You have these ideas in your head that make you excited, and you're like, you're doing it because not only other people relate to it, but it's something that is a way for you to tell your story.
Absolutely.
And that's, yeah, you're right. It's just this perfect thread that all this stuff is connected together on, because it really does go back to the same things,
Yeah,
being human and finding a way to inspire each other and get through this life. Because, life is pretty crazy sometimes. So
it is.
you need something,
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. I've said to many people, all never feel that you can't pursue a dream, no
Yeah,
matter how old you
exactly.
might get. Because things look, life happens, right?
Yep.
I went to school wanting to be a journalist, and I that didn't pan out for me. I got to do it for a little bit, but then I met my wife, and we had kids, and things change. You go out and get your 9 to 5 because you got to support your family,
Yep.
and things are a little bit, things are different. Now, looking back at it now, is actually a good thing because journalism's pretty much dead except for
Oh,
online
yeah.
stuff
You're
anyway.
right. You're right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was going trying to write for a newspaper. Well, guess what? They don't really exist much anymore, so it's
Yeah.
probably just as well.
Yeah.
But now, all these years later, and I have to say, there's two people I have to thank for it. My oldest daughter, during COVID, said to me, "Dad, why don't you try podcasting?" And I'm like, "What?
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
know what I'm
You're so
doing.
good
I
at it,
can't
Joe.
do that." And she said, "Dad, it's an app. You literally go in and press a button." I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, it can't be that easy. And then that's when, like Scott was referring to, I started the '80s show then, and then I started a wrestling show that I have a co-host with, that I'm friends with, that I've never met, and we've been doing it for 4 years together, which
Oh, I
is
didn't know
insane.
that. I've got to tell my
Yeah,
friend. He's
I've
such a wrestling fanatic. He
Oh
will
yeah,
love your show. I'll
we've been
tell him.
doing that. Yeah, we've been doing. It's called Insiders Pro Wrestling. We've been doing this
Nice.
with that for 4 years, and it was great. During COVID, the wrestlers were all kind of stuck in the house like we were, so we were able to
Yeah.
get wrestlers on the show. It was
Oh,
like, oh
that's
yeah,
so
I'll come
cool.
on,
So cool.
um, and yeah, and so and then this. I got doing this because I picked up a game, and I'm like, oh, it's Marvel. I'm gonna play this,
Yeah.
and I started playing. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go talk about this because I dig it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm able to now at 54 years old, I'm able to live out a dream, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
It is
Um,
amazing. And you're exactly right. Like you're never ever too old to do anything that you want. As long as you're living and breathing, you can do it.
yep,
Sometimes it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end. The payoff is so much better than the hard work you put in. You like at first you might think, is this worth it? But eventually you'll find out it's worth it. And that's what's so amazing about this. I'm so glad that your daughter said that because dude, you're amazing at this. Like you have the voice, you have the personality, you have the ideas. And see, that's what it's all about is sometimes you got to listen to your inner voice and sometimes the people in your life, right? To kind of like realize not just your dream, but realize your talents and your skills. And sometimes you just don't realize it, right?
that's
Until
true.
you just go for something, then you realize like, wow, I didn't know I was good at this.
Yep, yep, 100%. And I think it's what's even cooler is that we live in a world now where like the app for me to record podcasts, Spotify was there. So we live in a world now where, like you were saying, it's easier for you to go out and do this.
Yeah.
You can anyone that's out there can literally, yeah, like for instance, if you're interested in music, right, you can go out there. There's that thing called GarageBand on iPhones now where you can
Yeah.
go in there
Oh yeah.
and do some small stuff by yourself. You can do that. If you learning how to play an instrument. While I would always say go and get lessons from someone because I still think that's the best way to do it.
I
But
agree. I
you
agree.
can try to self teach yourself, and I'm sure there's stuff out there that's on the computer or anywhere else, YouTube, wherever, that you can, maybe get started in stuff like that. So yeah, that's it's really phenomenal. And when I talk to people like yourself and people who have followed a dream, that they've had, I would preach that to anyone. And really, that's what this all is about,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Sure that my show here is about a game, but whether it is you're playing the game because you enjoy it to relax, whatever the case might be, but it's all about someone that made that game followed a dream of their own. And I
Exactly.
guarantee you that they probably have similar backgrounds to me and Scott, and probably were big fans of superheroes when they were kids. And now they're doing something that they love, designing a game that they can see go out there and get into everybody's hands. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's it's amazing, man.
And it's just what's also amazing is like when you just take this game for example, how far we've come there. Like when you go
Oh
back
my
to the
gosh.
old games, right? Like X-Men and all the old ones
Yep.
from the 80s and 90s, and
Yep.
it's just amazing. Like same with the movies, what you brought up earlier. It's just phenomenal how far we've come. It's like you're there. If
Yes.
they're in space, it's just amazing to be able to see the graphics and just the details now, even in the toys, right? Like when
I
we
have to.
grew up, we were
Oh,
excited to get those little Secret Wars toys, but
it's a little, yeah.
compare them to the ones now, it's like there's
Oh,
no
the details
competition.
is insane.
Yeah,
Like the figures, you could barely make out their face because they were just
yeah,
blurred
yeah.
colors.
Some of them didn't even
Now,
look like them.
oh my
It's funny.
God. Now it's like the details are so incredible. Like these figures that come out are like they look just like the actual the thing from the films.
Yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
insane. I have to show you. So here, I'll pop this
Yeah.
up there.
Definitely.
That's the
Oh, that's
See the card?
amazing.
So that's
Yes.
that's the Galactus card with the comic book cover
Oh,
I was talking about. It says Marvel
that's
Comics Group up
exciting.
on the top, and just like the old cards did. And the cards are all animated. They're literally all, so like
Wow.
you see like the cards moving and stuff like that. It's really like a phenomenal game
Oh
that they put
man.
together here. And what's awesome about it, the people that are playing it know. Here, I'll show you this one too.
Oh, that's so awesome,
You
man.
can you can do all different kind of like borders. You can ink them. You can make them gold. Like this one's inked, but it's really,
Gorgeous.
and it's awesome because you play the game in 3 minutes. It's like
Wow.
that quick. You can get on, play a couple games. You can go to the bathroom, play a couple games. Like it's a 3 minute little game that
Wow,
came
that's
out.
amazing. Yeah, I
It,
definitely got to check that out.
it's really
I'm
cool.
definitely curious about it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really cool. So, man, I loved it. I appreciate you so much for coming out and
Oh
talking a
yeah,
little bit
thank you,
about the
man.
music and stuff like that.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, it's amazing. And thank you so much for again letting me use the song because it's just the perfect
Oh,
song for my
anytime, man.
show.
Anytime. Thank
Um,
you for playing it, man. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Once again, before we go, I want to let Scott go because he's got a road trip to go on. So let everybody know again where they can find you, where they can find your music and stuff like that before we get out of here.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you once again for having me on. It's always a
Anytime.
pleasure, man. And yeah, you guys can find me at YouTube/Elevate the Sky and Bandcamp/Elevate the Sky. So I made it. I try to make it easy, where it's just if you just even put in "Elevate the Sky" on the Google search, or if you go to YouTube search, you'll find it.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. And the new single is called
Ocean Soul,
Ocean
and
Soul.
it's under Ocean and the Stars, but it's still on my YouTube Elevate the Sky YouTube channel. Because
Awesome.
until I can get enough singles, I'm not really going to focus on a separate channel for Ocean and the Stars. So
Yeah.
you can find everything that I do right now on my Elevate the Sky YouTube channel, and see what is the final Friday of this month. I think it's the 28th. Yeah, the 28th,
28th.
which is
Mm-hmm.
almost a week away.
Yep.
The single, The Heartbeat, which will be under Elevate the Sky and on the Elevate the Sky YouTube channel. There'll be a music video as well as the new single released on Bandcamp.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I can't wait.
Thanks.
Can't wait, man. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure
Thank
talking
you.
to you. Check out Scott's YouTube. It's so much fun between the music and stuff that's there. And like I said, if you ever want a grand tour of California, go check that out, man. He's walked up to the Hollywood sign in California, hiked up there. He's walked through Beverly Hills, all these cool little shops that he's gone to. This one shop was it a Chinese, or a Japanese store that you went to, or it was
Yeah, I
all
think
like
it was kind of like
product.
a lot of like Godzilla and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
like a
Yeah.
market that had all different foods and stuff, but it was all in like in that language and things
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I forget Daiso. Yeah, Japanese little store.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's crazy. Like all the stuff that stuff I've never seen. But yeah, go check it out. Obviously, I joined him on there for that video review for Journey song.
Yeah. What a
Hopefully, we get a
blast.
chance to do those more in the
Yeah, as
future.
soon
They
as
were
I
a lot
get
of fun,
back,
man.
when I
Yeah,
get back, man, I'm excited for us to do another one.
yeah,
That'd be
definitely
cool.
for sure. Reaction
Yeah,
videos are fun. Good
totally.
stuff, my friend. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. I appreciate it. Guys, that's going to do it for this video. Please make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, you drop a like on the video. You heard Scott earlier talk about why that's so important. So make sure you do it. It's free to do. You don't get charged to drop likes on videos. Make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Obviously, also for those listening on audio, I love all of you guys as well. That's where I started. Leave me some comments. Put a comment on there. You can comment on videos on Spotify, or I'm sorry, on audio on Spotify or Apple. So do that as well. Yeah, make sure you check out the other two shows I have out. The audio pod is going to be out also today at some point. And of course, the interview that I did yesterday with Doc D on the channel, is out now as well. So make sure you check all that out. Have a great rest of your week, guys. I will talk to you next Monday after my surgery. Hope you all have an awesome week. Please be kind to one another, be safe, and hopefully I will see you all for the next episode. Have a great day, everybody.